Good morning, Who Dat Nation, and happy Sunday to our Bayou Blitz family. We'd like to welcome you to the Bayou Blitz Week 13 pregame show. I am Bob Rose. I am one of your hosts to our pregame extravaganza. And joining me is my partner in crime and seems to be relatively healthy, unlike the New Orleans Saints, Brendan Boylan. Good morning, Brendan. Happy Sunday to you.
Good morning. I was not aware we went from a show to an extravaganza. So
Everything we do is an extravaganza,
that's
sir.
exciting. That is exciting. Hopefully everybody's having a good weekend so far. Good start to the morning. I know Bob's had about 29 cups of coffee already. I'm on cup 2 or 3. So hopefully you guys are awake or in the process of getting awake this morning. We'll see if the Saints are. I think Bob and I have our own thoughts on where the Saints are going to stand in terms of this ball game, and we'll get into that. But Bob, some right off the gate, some big stuff when it comes to the injury report. Two of the bigger names that were listed as questionable going into this game, Chris Olave and Cameron Jordan. What's their status and what's the updates on those two fellows, along with the rest of the unhealthy New Orleans Saints?
Folks, Chris Olave, who has been dealing with a concussion suffered last week against Atlanta, is active and in uniform and will play. He practiced with the team on a limited basis most of the week. In fact, all week. With increasing duties as the week progressed, and we are told that he passed his final concussion protocol. So Chris Olave will play today. Cam Jordan, and if you're a longtime fan of the Saints and or Mr. Jordan, you knew that if Cam could walk, he could play. Well, that is the case. Cam Jordan left last week's game against Atlanta with an ankle injury, did not practice all week, but will play and is in uniform. And a third member of the New Orleans Saints, who we have not seen very much of lately, in fact, none of lately, Jimmy Graham, the old number 80. You could dust off those uniforms if you got them in your closet because the Jimmy will be active today. Not surprising. Brendan and I both suspected that this would happen because inactives include on offense, Michael Thomas, who, of course, is on injured reserve for the second consecutive week. Rashid Shaheed, not active. Kendre Miller, not active. Nick Saldiveri, not active. Jake Haener, inactive. Defensively, Marshawn Lattimore, also on injured reserve for the second consecutive week. So he's obviously out. Safety Marcus May, out. Linebacker Pete Warner out, and cornerback Cam Dantzler, who they activated from the practice squad earlier this week, he is inactive as well. So those are the significant names for the New Orleans Saints that are not playing. For the Detroit Lions, Alex Anzalone, the former Saint linebacker, Alex Anzalone, unlikely to play, listed as doubtful coming in. With a hand wrist injury. I've not heard anything different, so I don't think Anzalone is going to be a go for today. Other than that, the Detroit Lions. What's that?
He did not make the trip. He actually welcomed the second child of the world.
Oh, well, good for him.
Trip.
Good for him. Congratulations to Alex and his family. I hope baby and mom are doing quite well. But thankfully, he won't be on the field for the against the New Orleans Saints today.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. He's a guy who, and I think we mentioned this on Wednesday too, he was a guy that when healthy, you knew what he could do. Was very productive in New Orleans, but the health was always a concern. He's been healthy for the Lions for the most part this season, and he's been a big part of the Lions turnaround as well. Unfortunately, it says Facebook user, but you're the GOAT to somebody, Bob. With your knowledge. Yeah. Let's go ahead and get that shout out there. So the Saints a lot less healthy than the Detroit Lions. Let's talk about the Lions a little bit. This is a team that is historically bad, right? I guess that's the easiest way to say it. Historically, this is a Lions team that has mightily struggled. Notably, had quote unquote wasted the Hall of Fame careers of both Barry Sanders and Calvin Johnson. But this is a team that playing really good football this year. Has surprised some people. Some people expected this type of jump, depending who you asked. Maybe not to this extent, but there was plenty of people that thought this was a Lions team that could definitely compete for the division, and they're doing just that. Defense started the year spectacularly. The last 4 or 5 weeks, statistically, not as impressive for the Lions. They're coming off of a tough Thanksgiving Day outing against their division rivals in the Green Bay Packers, but they had a long week. Bob, for the people who haven't watched a lot of Lions film this year and are not familiar with the type of football that Detroit is playing, what can they expect from? We'll start with the offense. So Jared Goff and that high flying offense that's been a joy to watch this year.
I tell you, Detroit's one of my favorite teams to watch play football. And coming into the year, I predicted that they would win the NFC North after a strong finish to the 2022 season. And they picked up that momentum, as you said, Brendan. What we can expect from Detroit is simply this: fast, physical, and aggressive football. Led by head coach Dan Campbell, who is Dennis Allen in the Bizarro world, the exact opposite. Former Saint defensive assistant, former Saint cornerback Aaron Glenn is the defensive coordinator for Detroit. But the Lions have garnered most of their headlines because of the offense. Jared Goff is having a strong season, completing around 68% of his passes, 8 touchdown passes, and the Lions rank 3rd in passing production. But they're not just a pass-happy team. This is a rushing offense that ranks 6th in the National Football League with about 137 yards per game, averaging over 4.6 per carry, which is in the top 5 in the league also. Detroit can beat you in a number of ways. First and foremost, I mentioned how physically they like to play. That's because of an offensive line who, you could argue is the best in the National Football League. Especially those tackles, Taylor Decker and Penei Sewell, left tackle and right tackle respectively. But Detroit has had some issues with interior pass protection. Jared Goff has been sacked 5 times in the last 2 games and been hit 20 times by his last 2 opponents. And as a result, Goff by himself has turned the ball over 6 times, 3 fumbles, 3 interceptions. So that's something to watch for a New Orleans defense that has been struggling mightily over the last 5 or 6 games, but is still getting turnovers. So that might be, in my opinion, this gives the Saints a puncher's chance. But nonetheless, Detroit has, one of the best wide receivers in the NFL, and Amon-Ra St. Brown, 82 catches, 993 yards, one of the best young tight ends in the game, and rookie Sam Laporta, and a deep receiving core with Josh Reynolds, Khalif Raymond, Jamison Williams, and don't forget that they picked up Donovan Peoples-Jones too. But again, this isn't just a pass-happy Lions unit. David Montgomery, one of the most underrated backs in the NFL. You and I loved him with the Chicago Bears. And, Dan Campbell made no secret of the fact that when he drafted Jahmyr Gibbs out of Alabama with their first-round choice this year, that he envisioned Gibbs playing a kind of an Alvin Kamara role to Montgomery's Mark Ingram. Those were almost his quotes word for word. And again, Dan Campbell being a former Saints offensive assistant, that makes sense. And it's worked for Detroit. David Montgomery has played the Mark Ingram role, while Gibbs, he's added 566 yards on the ground and caught 41 balls. So he is a test and a mismatch for any team's linebacking core. This Detroit Lions offense, if they can take care of the football, they are an absolute juggernaut to deal with in every way possible.
I agree. And remember, it was Campbell and the Lions that were getting a lot of grief from fans this year for the lack of use of Gibbs. But I think it's a prime example of this, and not to get too off topic, but there's a lot of expectation for rookies in the NFL now, more so than there's ever been, to come in and perform. But we say it all the time here. We've said it for years. The years we've worked together, not just on the draft, but on shows like this, is that the first 3 or 4 weeks of the regular season are almost an extension of the preseason in getting adjusted and acclimated to things. And it was about that time where Gibbs really came on the scene and showing how versatile he can be without taking 100% or 90+% of the snaps at running back. So they definitely found a home for him. Defensively for the Lions, I mentioned this is a team that the first half of the season to this point was balling out. Statistically, you've seen the numbers dip a little bit. They're towards the middle of the pack in just about every category Now, what makes this team dangerous on the defensive side of the ball? And we all know Dan Campbell's intensity and how that leaks into all aspects of the field. But is this a team that's going to hit you hard in the mouth, or a team that's going to be speedy sideline to sideline? And how do the Saints combat that?
This is a Detroit defense that likes to come downhill at you and just absolutely level you. They have two stud defensive linemen in second year, Aiden Hutchinson. I think everybody knows his name, but a name that a lot of people don't know is defensive tackle Alan McNeil. Third year guy out of NC State. I remember working the draft with you a few years ago. We both love this kid. Wanted the Saints to grab him. McNeil is built like a prototypical run stuffer, but he also has 5 sacks and 12 pressures. So he will bring the heat on the inside. While Hutchinson can pressure the quarterback, on the outside, and is an outstanding run stuffer, in his own right. At linebacker, again, the line, Dan Campbell and the Lions got a lot of criticism for selecting Jack Campbell, the Iowa linebacker, with their second first-round pick. Well, Campbell has that it factor to him. He doesn't jump off of the charts with any kind of athleticism or any kind of special collegiate numbers, but he just knows the game so well. He is always in position. He's one of their downhill defenders at linebacker. Him and Derek Barnes, will absolutely punch you in the mouth. Absolutely spectacular against the run. They're going to be missing a big piece in Anzalone, so I'll be interested to see how and if Pete Carmichael, Alvin Kamara, and Derek Carr attack that. In the secondary, the Lions are extremely vulnerable with cornerback. And that shows. Over their last 3 games, they've given up 760 passing yards and 8 touchdowns. But the Lions have a trio of safeties that I absolutely love. Second year Kirby Joseph, absolute ball hawk. I think he has 9 or 10 interceptions so far in his career. Rookie Brian Branch, a second rounder this year. Real versatile guy. Kind of plays that Chauncey Gardner-Johnson role, who is, by the way, out for the Lions today. But Branch can line up at slot corner, outside corner, deep safety, or in the box. He is a true playmaker in the making. And in addition to Tracy Walker, longtime Lions veteran. He's a guy that plays very well, good instincts on the back end, but can step into the tackle box like another linebacker. The thing about the Lions is, their numbers, as you said, look pretty. They're 9th in total defense overall, 5th against the run. But you got to look closer at those numbers. A lot of teams have abandoned the run against Detroit because they've either fallen behind early or they found themselves in a shootout with that explosive Lions offense. So if the Saints can stay in the game, it'll be interesting to see if Detroit can stop the run or contain the run later on in the game. I mentioned the passing numbers against the Lions the last few weeks. They do rank 20th, against the pass, and their 19 passing touchdowns that they've given up outranks 27th in the NFL, with quarterbacks completing about 63% of their attempts against them. So if you can keep Derek Carr upright against Hutchinson and McNeil, you got a real shot to find some targets open in the Lions secondary.
Well, let's go ahead and talk about the Saints offense, since you're talking about opportunities to attack that secondary. I want to start with this. The Saints caught some strays this week from national media. One yesterday on game day with Florida State fan, comedian. I don't remember the name off the top of my head, but was talking about Florida State going to the ACC championship with a 3rd-string quarterback. And he said, well, Jameis still has some years of or months of eligibility, right? Because the Saints are certainly not using him, right? So how as he comes back to Florida State, and Florida State won the ACC title here in my backyard last night. Congratulations to them. It's going to be weird to see the playoff positioning with everything that happened yesterday.
Yeah.
Those 4, but they caught that stray, and then McAfee this week as well, saying the Saints should bench Derek Carr for Jameis Winston. There's a lot of eyes and pressure on Carr now, not just from the local media, but with what I'm saying, especially the national media is starting to take attention to the struggles of Derek Carr. You mentioned it's a great opportunity for him and a depleted Saints receiving corps to take advantage of the secondary. But let's talk about the depleted receiving corps and then Derek Carr after the fact. Yes, Olave is going to play. But after that, it is a lot of names that if you're not a Saints fan, and you're not familiar with this team, you're looking at and going, who? Because after Chris Olave, it's going to be A.T. Perry. It's
Mhm.
going to be Keith Kirkwood. It's going to be Marquez Callaway, who just got called up from the practice squad. I'll mention this again if you missed Wednesday's show. He will be wearing his third different number as a New Orleans Saint. So for you weirdos out there that like weird facts like that, like I do, the only other one that comes to mind off the top of my head is Mark Ingram wore 3 different numbers for the New Orleans Saints as well. They're just fun facts because typically when guys come back, they at least can get their number back. In this case, he can't have either of his old numbers. So the Saints depleted at that position. You mentioned Jimmy Graham is going to be active today, so that's another receiving threat there. But how do the Saints attack this Lions secondary, particularly with the fact that really outside of Chris Olave, you look at A.T. Perry, Keith Kirkwood, Marquez Callaway, there's not a lot of experience there working with Derek Carr. I mean, you could even make the case Olave hasn't had a full year with Carr yet, but even more so, you have those 3 receivers that are going to go, well, there's not a whole lot we got here. I mean, A.T. Perry's lone career touchdown came from Jameis Winston, not Derek Carr. Marquez Callaway outside of this week, does he have any experience playing with Derek Carr? No.
Mhm.
And then Keith Kirkwood, a guy who has been up, down, cut, brought back, and up and down multiple times. This could be a game of communication issues for the New Orleans Saints. Do you see it that way?
Yeah, I see that possibility. Absolutely. And we saw that issue manifest itself last week with Derek Carr and A.T. Perry on two different plays, including one key play in the red zone, where it looked like Perry ran the wrong route. So yeah, Perry, Kirkwood, Callaway, Lynn Bowden, they're all going to have to be on the same page with their quarterback. And as a result, I don't expect a lot of complicated routes from those guys today, Olave included, because Olave's your go-to guy in the receiving core, so you can't muck him up, too much, with complicated, long-developing routes, because he's going to be the guy that Derek Carr looks for when he's in trouble or in big situations. So, we're going to see a lot of simplified, route trees from all the Saints wideouts today. So therefore, it's going to be on them to get separation and win their one-on-one matchups. Use your body, your head fakes, your shoulder fakes well at the line of scrimmage, against man coverage to get release. Make sure you're on the same page with your quarterback. Communicate on the sidelines, which is not something we have seen at all between Derek Carr and the rest of that offense today. We should also expect Alvin Kamara to be heavily used in the passing game. I know that feels like a no-brainer, but someone better slip Pete Carmichael the message, because too often over the last 2 years, Pete Carmichael has forgotten that Alvin Kamara is a pretty damn good receiver out of the backfield, and I would expect more than just Kamara out of the backfield. You need to line up 41 wide. You need to use them in the slot. You need to move them all around the formation, make the lines adjust to him, and then take advantage of a mismatch either that Kamara causes with himself, or that Kamara causes one of your other receivers to have. We talked about Jimmy Graham. I still wouldn't expect a lot of snaps from Graham today, but when he is in the game, expect it to be in the red zone and in key third down situations, and hopefully I could see them getting Jawan Johnson more involved too, especially with Anzalone out, because Anzalone's the best athlete that Detroit has at the linebacker position.
Well, you kind of stopped when you said Jamal, but I'm in that boat, and I have been in that boat. If you're going to use Kamara more in the receiving game, you have to get Jamal Williams involved against his former team. And you have to attack the middle a little bit, right? That's been one of my bigger knocks on, and obviously there's a lot of knocks on Carmichael this year. There's a lot of knocks on this whole coaching staff this year.
Right.
One of the biggest knocks is, why do you pay the guy? We thought it was a great deal when it happened, but now looking at it, it was like, okay, that was a little bit of a high deal for a running back, considering running backs are getting nothing on the open market. Not that it's like this salary crunching, how do we make the numbers work deal for Jamal Williams, but why do you go out and pay Jamal that kind of money over 3 years for this guy to be getting like 5 to 7 carries a game? I need to see more Jamal Williams involved. I want to kind of dial back to Derek Carr. let's all be honest, especially the guys in here. You guys know our thoughts on the situation at this point. I see you Jimmy and Eric and John. Fear, you're in here too. Fear wants to know real quick who's taking Warner's place today. We'll get to that when we talk about the Saints defense. Bob's reaction says it all, but let's stick on one sad topic before we go to the next sad topic. Okay. JB says, can they stop the run is what I'll be watching. Yeah, that's going to be a good point. We'll get all into the Saints defense. Eric says, I have Patron on ice ready for this long day. Well, talking to two guys that don't drink, we both understand it. We get it.
Yeah, you might want to do DoorDash for more.
Okay, well, DoorDash just got free advertisement from us. Congratulations, but I digress. This is a game for Derek Carr where, like I said, I think there's a lot more national eyes on the Saints. This is a game that's going to be like the game, the 1:00 game for a lot of the country as well. I don't think anybody's ready to say, well, if Derek has a bad game, they got to pull the plug on the season or anything like that. That's not going to happen. I think if he does have a bad game, more of the fans will call for it, certainly. But what do you expect out of Derek Carr? We've talked about maybe like lack of leadership, true leadership, maybe some issues there for Derek Carr. Obviously, the performance hasn't been there, lack of accountability. There's a lot of things that are concerning. In a game like this, where you're playing a really good team in the NFC, you're at home, a place where you have not won a lot of games lately, which, to quote Bob, that's a sign of a bad football team. You have that going on. You don't have two of your top three receiving weapons. And overall, you're a little bit of a banged up football team. What would be the dream scenario here for Derek Carr in your eyes? And what is the actual reality of this situation in your eyes?
The dream scenario, and frankly, what Derek Carr needs to happen for Derek Carr and for the New Orleans Saints, is he's a veteran quarterback, I believe 10 seasons in the league. He needs to take control of this young receiving core and make them better players. That's the thing that we haven't seen from Derek Carr. Great quarterbacks make the players around them a notch or two better. And I admit, we saw it from Drew Brees for over a decade and a half. That's the sign of an elite quarterback. And I grant you, there are not many elite quarterbacks in NFL history, let alone in the game today. But even if Derek Carr was a good player, he would be able to elevate the performances of a 6th-round pick in A.T. Perry, a couple of undrafted cast-offs in Keith Kirkwood, Marquez Callaway. Another cast off in Lynn Bowden. He would be able to elevate those guys. He would be able to take the offense on his shoulders and, maybe not put up astronomical numbers, but at least be more proficient and more productive than what the offense in general has been. Derek, if you look at Derek's individual numbers, and ignore the record and ignore what we've seen on the field, they aren't bad numbers aside from the lack of touchdown passes. But that right there is the problem. Then you only have to circle back to one number, the lack of touchdown passes and lack of efficiency in the red zone. That tells you that the quarterback, the coach, and the players, the skill position players, just aren't on the same page. It's now Derek's responsibility to do that. He has the C on his chest for a reason. He didn't earn it. It was given to him. Now, Derek, it's time for you to earn it. Especially in a situation like this, with not only local fans, but local media, national media down on you. We've heard we've talked about some cryptic comments that players, like respected guys like Alvin Kamara, Michael Thomas, players like that have made, not specifically mentioning Derek Carr, but it didn't take a rocket scientist to read between the lines. Derek needs to win that locker room back. So obviously that would be a dream scenario for him and the Saints, as a team. Realistically, to paraphrase a Dennis Allen phrase that makes us all nauseous now, I fully expect to see the same thing that we have seen week in and week out. Yeah, we know there's a problem. Yeah, we know we're working on it, and we have the right people for the job, and yet nothing happens. After 11 games, it's hard to believe that anything different is going to happen with the New Orleans Saints.
Any potential to fix the red zone woes. Jimmy Graham being active. I mean, you and I have been begging for that over the last few weeks, not just for the red zone, but third downs as well. Again, I want to stress this because we do bring up Jimmy's name a lot. Yes, well past his prime. Yes, probably his last year in the NFL. Jimmy Graham is not going to make this team a playoff team. Jimmy Graham is not going to be the guy who catches 10 balls for 100 yards, whatever. But he's enough of a presence to make a difference on third down in the red zone simply because of his size. And even though the athleticism is not near where it used to be, still a big athletic dude, right? We've been begging for that. But you get Jimmy Graham this week, but you lose some of your, we've already talked about Mike Thomas, Rashid Shaheed. You're going to have to use Kamara more in the passing game. Maybe you finally get Jamal Williams the ball inside the red zone. He led the league in rushing touchdowns last year, doesn't have a rushing touchdown this year. I mean, maybe that's a solution. I don't know. I'm not a rocket scientist, but that makes sense to me. So any hope?
You got to use more than you got to use Taysom more than just as a runner too. Make the Lions respect him as a receiver. Make the Lions respect the fact that he can throw the ball. Granted, not like a starting quarterback, but at least well enough to win a football game. You need to make the Lions defend every aspect of the jack of all trades that is Taysom Hill.
Absolutely. And you say a quarterback that can win games. I mean, I'm just going to throw some shade out there. Taysom and Jameis have a better win percentage as starters than Derek Carr, Andy Dalton, or Trevor Siemian. Just wanted to throw that out.
Yes, sir.
Because the guys that just are on the roster. But like I said, is there any hope for this red zone offense this week, even with the key pieces that are missing? We talk about Jimmy Graham. I've talked about Jamal Williams. You've talked about Taysom Hill. Sometimes when you have a problem, the easiest thing to do is try to simplify it to the nth degree and make it as vanilla as possible. This has not been an issue that was just last week. This has been an issue that has been ongoing and growing. Can the Saints make it vanilla at this point? And more importantly, will they make it as vanilla as possible when they get to the red zone?
The game plans, period, have been too vanilla, and that's been part of the problem. Simply put, when you get into the red zone, you need to rely on the players, A, that got you there, and B, rely on the players that defenses fear the most. Chris Olave, we won't talk about Shaheed or Thomas since they're not playing today, but Chris Olave, Taysom Hill, Alvin Kamara, and use them to the best of their ability. Don't run Kamara into the teeth of the defense. Don't run Olave and with a shoulder fade in the back corner of the end zone. Use Olave's route running ability. Use Kamara's balance and vision in the open field. Get them there. Use a guy like Jimmy Graham or Jawan Johnson and their physicalities in the middle of the field. So if that's what you mean by vanilla, then absolutely, pour me that big old glass of vanilla shake all day, because I'll take it, because we've not seen anything like that from the Saints. They misuse the weapons that they have, and they, frankly, they do it all over the field. But those mistakes and those inefficiencies are magnified once you get inside the 20, get inside the 10-yard line, and that's what we've seen.
Misusing is the best word you could have used there, because you look at why the Saints were so good over the Sean Payton era. And it wasn't always because they had the most talented roster, but it was the way they used people.
Mm-hmm.
And the examples aren't always the Pro Bowlers, right? It's easy to point, well, Jimmy Graham, when he was the first stint of Jimmy Graham, why was he so good? Well, they used him the way that Jimmy was supposed to. Why did Darren Sproles put up record-breaking numbers in his time in New Orleans? Well, they used him the right way. Mm-hmm. But it doesn't always apply to Pro Bowlers. You look at guys that had no business, in some people's mind, being on a team. You look at guys like Tavares Cadet. Why did Cadet have as long of a career as he did in New Orleans? Because they used him the way that he was intended to, and the way that brought out the best in him.
Yeah.
And then you could look at all those different scat backs during their times in New Orleans. I mean, you could look at Tavares Cadet. You could look at Marcus Murphy even, who had a couple years in New Orleans as a punt returner and kind of that scat back type of look. You look at guys like Ty Montgomery, who had success doing that in Green Bay. And what do the Saints do? Hey, we was doing that in Green Bay. Why can't he do it here?
Yep.
Does it here well? You look at receivers. I mean, we could go down the list like Lance Moore. You could pick out receivers that didn't have success anywhere else, right? That's what's been lacking, not just this year, but like the last 2.5 years, is not utilizing guys and bringing out their best. And people say, does coaching really matter at this level? Da, 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 da. Like, that's an active question, right? People say that all the time. Like, well, they're pros. Does coaching really make it? Yes, that is your prime example. Because look, Bob, you stand on a good day at what? 5, 9, 10, maybe on a good day.
I appreciate you giving me that. I've shrunk in my old age a little bit. I've got to be around 5'7" and change, between 5'7" and 5'8" now.
Okay, well, I was trying to give you a couple inches.
I appreciate it.
Yeah, you're welcome. You're welcome. But like, if Bob's my player and I'm the head coach and I'm looking at what Bob does well, he's an athletic, shorter guy, still has some speed at the crisp age of 29 years old. I don't think I'm throwing you fades in the back of the end zone, right?
Right.
Like, that doesn't make sense,
Yeah, and you're not going to run me into the teeth of the defense either.
I might do that once or twice just for giggles.
But. Well, right, yeah, for entertainment value, right?
Yeah. Game's over. Let's just see Bob get crushed. But that's what's been lacking for the Saints, particularly in the red zone. I would love to see some differences today. Hard when you're slim picking in terms of your receiving corps, but we'll see. Let's talk about the Saints defense real quick before we give some predictions and give people time to get their snacks and whatnot before the game starts. This is a defense that has been really disappointing in the pass rush, right? We don't even need to go into the numbers there. It's been bad. Cameron Jordan active today. That does make a difference. Pete Warner inactive. Fear was asking, well, who's going to take, his spot? That's a great question. We'll get into that. But this is a Lions team that is really athletic. Has a lot of playmakers. You mentioned some of the receivers that could really stretch the field. Jamison Williams, a guy like that. You go back and throw on his college tape at Alabama. Another Alabama teammate in Gibbs that, watching him play at Alabama very much, and I'm sure you had. I can almost envision your notes on him in the draft process, because it's like Alvin Kamara 2.0 is probably something pretty similar to what you wrote. And he may even be a little bit faster, not more agile, not as quick, right? I think there's a difference there between just pure speed and agility and quickness. Kamara might still be more quick and agile, but in terms of like burner speed, like Gibbs has that. Those are two guys you have to watch. We brought up David Montgomery in his time in Chicago. What a running back. What a fantasy back, too, during his years in Chicago. Those are definitely, when you're ticking boxes on who has the advantaged Lions all day right there against that Saints front seven. What concerns do you have, and how can the Saints combat a high-flying offense with a quarterback who, a couple years ago, people were ready to throw Jared Goff away, and all of a sudden he's a guy who's going to have a really good case to make the Pro Bowl this year?
First thing the Saints need to do is get fast and almost immediate interior penetration. We talk about Carl Granderson, Cam Jordan on the edge, with Cam, and expect Cam to have limited snaps today. At least I do. So then you're looking at Isaiah Foskey, Tano Pass, and those guys got to make plays on the edge, no question about it. But you still have the athletic disadvantage when you're going against not only Gibbs, but Montgomery too. I know Demario Davis is still a fantastic linebacker, but now you're talking about Zach Bond replacing an already limited Pete Werner. And, Werner was a liability in open space as it was. Zach Bond is an absolute joke in open space. So you've got How are you going to prevent that? You got to prevent these guys from getting into open space, prevent Gibbs from getting there, prevent Montgomery from getting there. You're obviously not going to be able to knock them down, without fear of a penalty. So you take them out of the equation, and you do that with Brian Bresee, Nathan Shepard, Malcolm Roach. You got to get into that backfield quick. You got to alter the runner's pass, to the edge and to those off tackle plays. You got to get in Goff's face so he doesn't have time to let those routes to Gibbs develop, where he's going to be able to beat Demario Davis, or Zach Bond in space. You got to rush Goff. You got to make him feel uncomfortable, because we've seen enough Jared Goff when he was with the Rams against the Saints to know that once you let that guy get into a rhythm, he's going to rip your defense apart. So, and you say it all the time, no quarterback likes interior pressure. Yeah, I acknowledge that the Saints need to get pressure somehow, some way, but the best way to get it is Bresee, Nate Shepard, or I expect. We often see Demario Davis be brought in on inside blitzes. I don't expect that as much today, because they need Demario to try to track down Jahmyr Gibbs. You don't want Zach Bond trying to do it. So if they bring any interior rushers from the linebacking position, I expect it to be Zach Bond, not Demario Davis, because at least Bond is a physical downhill runner. Again, you use your best players. You use your players' best attributes, and you don't want Zach Bond in space. You want him coming downhill towards the ball. So you need to make Goff uncomfortable. You need to prevent the Lions' backs from getting to those off-tackle plays that they love to run, make them alter their pass. You need to do so by winning your matchup, by dominating your matchups on the inside.
Well, and remember, Bond was a what in the draft process, right? Outside linebacker, rush the quarterback, that type of deal. The Saints tried to move him inside. It hasn't worked. I'm not going to deny that. I've always said Zach is a NFL lifetime special teamer because of his athletic ability. But you're absolutely right. If you have to pick one of the two to drop into coverage and the other rush on third down, you definitely want the guy who rushed throughout his college career, is the more athletic of the two, to try to get after the quarterback. So we'll see what comes of that. As weird as it sounds, like even with Marshawn Lattimore out, I don't want to say I'm not concerned about the Saints secondary, because there are concerns when you're missing, a Pro Bowl, all-pro level type of guy. But they've been pretty good for the most part individually. You said no Marcus May today?
Correct.
Little bit of a concern there, but the Saints should be used to that at this point. Howden's had some time. I mean, I made the joke last year. I don't think he played back-to-back games last year. He broke that trend this year. He played some back-to-back games, but the dude stays hurt. Unfortunately, it's a part of the game. You can't blame people for that. It's a part of it. What do you expect to see out of the Saints secondary today against a guy in Jared Goff that you already mentioned has torn the Saints up in his NFL career?
A lot of times we'd see Marshawn Lattimore shadow an opponent's best wideout. There's no question that the Detroit's best wideout is St. Brown. Without Lattimore in there, it'll be interesting to see how the Saints deal with Amon-Ra St. Brown. If anybody shadows him, you can expect it to be Paulson Adebo, who's having a fantastic year, by the way. And that's why a lot of us aren't fretting too much about the absence of Lattimore, because Adebo, terrific year. Alontae Taylor, a very good year, very underrated year, and an excellent cornerback. And Isaac Yiadom, we know that every time he sees the field, he plays well. So, as long as those guys play up to their level of, the level of ability that we've seen from them, then they can cause some havoc against the Detroit passing game. As long as they can avoid penalties. That's a big if, because all these Lions receivers are extremely shifty, and we know that none of the Saints defensive backs handle that well. I'll tell you what worries me is how New Orleans is going to defend Sam Laporta. Tight ends have really torn them up this year. We saw it as recently as Cole Kmet of the Bears and TJ Hawkinson of the Vikings. May not being out And at this point in his career, I don't want to see Tyrann Mathieu in man coverage. I want to see that as little as possible. Use Matthew's instincts on the back end to help out those cornerbacks, and use a versatile, athletic guy like Jordan Howden, to try to take on Laporta early on. If Howden can't match up with Laporta, then you got to use Alontae Taylor on him, and that could spell trouble, because now all of a sudden you're talking about a very thin cornerback crew. If you're using Alontae on Laporta and you only have Adebo and Yidum left to deal with St. Brown, Josh Reynolds, Khalif Raymond, and Jamison Williams. So I think how they deal with Sam Laporta, and whether they can contain Sam Laporta with Jordan Howden and or Demario Davis, that's an underrated key to this secondary and how well they're going to do today.
Last point I want to make about the Lions. Fear throws it out. The Lions, really good offensive line. How do the Saints combat that in the run game? We already talked about Montgomery. We talked about Gibbs. For Gibbs, it's all about getting to the edge, right? Montgomery, it's a little bit of a different game plan. Really good offensive line for the Lions. What do the Saints do to stop the run?
Again, I go back to interior. Jahmyr Gibbs, obviously a guy you want in space if you're Detroit, but David Montgomery, a very underrated athlete too. They run Montgomery a lot off tackle as well. You don't want those guys to get unimpeded lanes off tackle, and to do that, you have to win your interior battles. Yes, Carl Granderson, Jordan, Passanio, Foskey when he's in the game, they have to at least stalemate Sewell and Taylor Decker on the edge. But you shouldn't expect those guys to win a whole lot of one-on-one matchups against Sewell and Decker. You at least got to stalemate them, and get interior disruption. Brissy, Shepard, Roach, etc. Bringing Bond inside, bringing Demario inside to shoot those gaps. Try to get to the Lions' backs before they get to the edge, or at least make them alter their path, take a wider berth, and give time for your safeties or cornerbacks to cut them down at the edge. That's the best way I see the New Orleans being able to contain the Detroit running game.
And before we go into score predictions and all that joyous stuff, John threw this out there. So John says 5'7". I figure bigger than that. Camera adds a few extra inches. If that's the case, John, I want you to guess how tall I am. Curious. If Bob is 5'7", how tall is Brendan? Bob, let's go into these score predictions.
And to be fair, I had a 38-inch vertical back in the day too, and I could run a 4.3. So might not be a lot of bulk to me, but I was difficult to contain in space.
Yeah, well, I can confirm my vert was never that high, and my 40 was never that low. Anyway, I didn't know that. Obviously I know the volleyball background, but that is a high vertical.
Yeah, I could. I couldn't palm a basketball, but I could touch rim. And tennis ball, volleyball, which I could palm. I could dunk those.
Dang, we got to get Bob on the court. At this age, see what he's got left. John said, I guess you're around 6 foot. You're pretty accurate. I'm about 6'1", so you're pretty much on point. We've joked privately all week, Bob, that this is a game that we do not foresee going well for the New Orleans Saints. That this is going to be a really tough one. I think for the most part, over the years, especially with this show, we've tried to be positive in giving our score predictions that, hey, the Saints are going to keep it close or win the football game. This is going to be one of those rare times I don't think I'm anywhere close to either of those. I think it's going to be hard to watch. I think it's going to be a little brutal. And I don't think Derek Carr is escaping any sort of criticisms this week and going into next week. And I don't take that as a personal shot towards Derek Carr. There are a lot of things working against Derek Carr this week on top of everything else because of some of the injuries. So, listen, Detroit's defense, like I said, statistically has not been as good as they were at the beginning of the year. This is still a really talented defense. Offensively, this is one of the better offenses in the league. And with the Saints' inability to score touchdowns, I could see this getting away from New Orleans quickly. Getting behind early and having to play catch up all day. That's the type of game plan that I see. That's the forecast I kind of see for this. I think the Saints get blown out at home. Unfortunately, Bob's talked about it a lot, how this is a team that where dome field advantage does not really feel like a thing anymore. And this is a team that really needs to kind of reevaluate where they are. So I'm going to take Detroit winning this football game 35-13. I think it's rough. I really do. Fear says Carr didn't do anything when he had all of them healthy. Yeah, that's kind of my point.
Right.
On top of that, on top of all the difficulties Derek Carr's had this year, whether it's self-inflicted, Carmichael, mix of both, he also doesn't have two of his top three receivers. I just don't see this going well. Hem is a lot more negative than Fears. Yeah, he says 40-3. That's a lot more negative than me.
Wow.
Yeah, I think
I'll tell you what. For you folks that want Dennis Allen fired, 40-3 at home might do it. It might.
Maybe. But yeah, I don't see this going well. I'll throw my touchdown prediction out there just for giggles. It's going to make everybody in fantasy mad. Because it's not going to be anybody that anybody starts. Jamal Williams is finally going to find the end zone. That's going to be.
You know what? I think that too.
Like, it's going to be the one guy who's like, oh, okay, he finally got in. Good for him. It's kind of the it's like, oh, if Jamal Williams scores, that makes the game 31-10. But it's gonna be a bad day, I think.
It's hard not to feel that. And I mentioned earlier, that the Lions have had some struggles lately, turning the ball over, not being able to protect Goff, and struggling with their own pass defense, and how that could give New Orleans what I call a puncher's chance for you boxing fans, excuse me. And I stand by that statement. You use Taysom Hill in different ways and get him rolling. You get Alvin Kamara involved as a receiver. Olave, keeps his head clear all day and has a big game. You could potentially see New Orleans having some success offensively. Defensively, we know that secondary can cause turnovers and create chaos. So, you could see how that could cause issues for Detroit there. So, like I said, I stand by my statement of a puncher's chance, but the realities are this. In the last 6 games, the Saints have given up, in the first half alone, 58% third down conversions, 234 yards on average, and 19 points in the first half alone on average. They come out that dead today, and they're going to be down 35-0 at halftime. It's that simple. Saints 6-6 at home under Dennis Allen. Saints 1-11 against teams with a 500 or better record when they play them under Dennis Allen. That's the reality. And Brendan and I here are looking at reality, and I understand you Who Dat for life people. I respect you and I love you, and I will love this team until I'm in the ground as well. But what have we seen from the New Orleans Saints at all in the last year that makes you really believe that they are going to pull off the upset against Detroit? I think it's going to be ugly too. I'm going 31-10 Lions. And that 10, New Orleans might be lucky to get that 10. I hope I'm wrong, but that's just the way I see it playing out.
Yeah, no, I mean, and we said this for weeks. Until they show me something different, why should I expect anything different? And they still have yet to show me anything different. Bob, with that, you have some work that has came out this week. People who want to get the last little bit of information on this game and how the Saints could potentially pull off the upset. Detroit 4.5 point favorites according to Vegas. Vegas is giving them 4.5. I would still take that. Like, honestly, if you guys are betting people, I would still take that. It's not going to be. I do not think it's going to be close. But with that, Bob, where can people read your work with the Saints News Network, and where can people follow you individually?
Folks, thanks for tuning in to our Bayou Blitz pregame show. Brendan and I were talking before we went live on the air. We'll give you a postgame show unless it's an absolute blowout. If it's the type of game that has all of you turning off your TV sets at halftime or in the third quarter, then we won't prolong your agony by going live. So if it's a close game, watch for our posts. We'll let you know. In the meantime, you can follow me individually, Bob Rose on Facebook, at Bobby R2613 over on Twitter, and obviously through the Saints News Network, where you can follow myself, Kyle Mosley, John Hendricks, and Ross Jackson. Saints News Network on Twitter, SI.com for hashtag Saints for that team coverage on the Sports Illustrated site, and at Saints News on Twitter.
And for myself, you can follow me virtually everywhere at BT Boylan. Like Bob said, we may come on, we may not. We'll let you guys know. Make sure you follow us on Twitter at Bayou Blitz Pod. We'll let you know there. Also, if you're subscribed to the Saints News Network and their Facebook notifications, you will get a little notification if we choose to go live because you're subscribed to those notifications. So we will let you know. Obviously, the scoreboard will let you know a little bit too. Hopefully, it's a close football game. I hope you guys enjoy it because let's face it, at the end of the day, Sundays are supposed to be fun days. You're supposed to have your family around, people you care about, have some good food, watch your favorite football team. Hopefully you guys still enjoy all those things. Hopefully Bob and I have given you the world's greatest pregame show extravaganza, not show, extravaganza. Whether they're winning or losing, we appreciate all of your guys' support. Whether we see you later today, whether we see you sometime next week, probably we'll have to talk about that. I think we're gonna have to use our magic powers once again to move the Bayou Blitz. It was gonna come. We couldn't have nice back-to-back weeks on a Wednesday, right? Not with my life. But I digress. I hope you guys all enjoy the game. Follow Bob, Kyle, John, and Ross over the Saints News Network. Get some of those last-minute reads of their articles in before kickoff. We'll see you sometime, whether it's today, whether it's later next week. Until then, hope you guys find some peace, spread love, practice positivity. Thanks for tuning in to the Bayou Blitz pregame show. See you later.